Hello, welcome to Shelby Radio. I am Shelby Carino, and this is episode number 700. I cannot believe it. I am on my 700th episode today. And this one is going to be, I would say, fairly interesting because it may challenge a belief system or it may validate a belief system you have already known about or felt, and you just need words put to it. And now here it is showing up for you in the universe. All right. But today's episode of number 700 is how reptilian energy hooks into the emotional body. And if you are a light worker listening to this podcast episode today, then you are welcome, because this is a topic that is not necessarily discussed a lot, because a true light worker really doesn't like going into the darker, what I call dungeons to be able to witness that there are other things about on this planet that are not of the light. And even though we say we know there are things out here that are not of the light, or there is dark and light, it's totally different when you are in the throes or the mix of battling a spiritual warfare up against something that isn't of the light, that is of a different species, okay? And I know for me, when I began waking up, I lived in this bubble where everything was magical and fairies and unicorns and just underground systems of castles and crystals and all of these things, right? The Lemurian, Atlantean type of vibe, which exist, right? However, to everything, there's a balance. So if there is something like that exists of pure crystalline energy and light, well, then there has to be something on the other side, opposite of that also exists. So the beauty in this ascension is we learn to not necessarily be scared of what may exist out here that we're not familiar with, as much as it is about embracing what that other side is in the role that it is played in our ascension. Because that's where the learning is, for the dark side of it and for the light side of it. So today I am going to shed, no pun intended, of the reptilian word, but I'm going to shed some light on really what reptilian energy is and how it hooks, and an experience that I just went through several days ago to unhook reptilian energy from someone's emotional body. All right. And I have to say, it was a first for me. I've done a lot of exorcisms on individuals, but this was the first where I really got in there to unhook the reptilian energy, see what it was, how it functions, where they exist, and then the power that needed to come forward to actually get it removed. Okay? So I'm going to go into all of that today. And I want to start by saying the way this all came about is because, I've been going through this process with my husband, Joe, and his mother and that side of the family. Well, next week, stick around because I have a huge update that is going to be, that I'm going to talk about, okay? But this showed up next, and this is why I have to discuss it. But anyway, as I've been going through this process with Joe and his mother and that side of the family and all of that spiritual warfare getting brought up and neutralized, I received an email submission through my website for my business where this person was specifically asking for tools of how to fight reptilian energy. And it was literally in divine timing, of course, as that submission came in because of something that was occurring in this new information that surfaced that Joe's going through with the family and his mother, which, I'll speak about next week. So I said to Joe, I went, oh, well, this makes sense that this email just came in because I had even been having a thought of the reptiles that have been continuously hooking to his mother that keep this loop going. And so I was like, okay, this is meant to be. So fortunately, it was great because when you fill out my contact form on my website, like I have said in other episodes, there's an option of how you would like to be reached back out to, text, phone call, email. Well, this person said phone. They wanted a phone call. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm really meant to have a conversation with this person because the energy transfer is different if you're voice to voice instead of just like texting or email. So this submission came in. I saw it later at night. So I decided to sleep on it. And then I was going to call her the next day, this person the next day. So that's what I did. Well, when I called her the next day, she said, Shelby, I knew you were the one to help me with this. And I was a little bit like, oh, okay, well, gosh, I hope I meet the standard of what she's asking me for, right? And so this is why I'm doing this episode today, for you to be able to learn what reptilian energy is, how it hooks into the body emotionally, and really what a real session looks like in order to unhook this energy. So what I'm going to do is really basically describe to you what a classic interdimensional emotional warfare scenario with reptilian entities look like, okay? How they hook into a Lightworker's emotional field, especially through the stomach or the solar plexus area, the sacral chakra area. And that's how they feed. That's how they survive. That's how they gain control through manipulation, through creating confusion, and ultimately creating exhaustion. Okay? Now, what was interesting is this new client that came through, the reptilian connection that she was calling me for help with actually mirrored what my husband Joe in his lineage entanglement has been. And this one person in the family who I always knew was that reptilian energy was the one where I was unhooking it all. And I was like, oh, I had it pegged the entire time. And I will talk about that next week. However, what this session did for me and for my client and also my husband, Joe, is it created basically like a threefold unhooking, right? That triangle, right? So it was unhooking through me as the medium with the client and also my husband. So it was this threefold process where the frequency had to dislodge what this reptilian grip had been in her world, in my world, in Joe's world. And we had to maneuver this through multiple channels of light because I had to raise the frequency really, really high. And I had never done it like that before. Okay. So I had to bring in some much higher wisdom of self. I had to bring in that neutral energy. My husband, Joe, had to get involved and ground through his male energy. He had to do some protections. And then, of course, the client, well, she had to be ready to have the sovereignty, which she was, which is how she found me. And I'll get into that in a second. And then I even had to incorporate some physical elements such as the Hawaiian salt, verbal light commands, the earth, wind, air, fire elements, things of like that. So this is the conversation that I'm going to get into today. And so let me kind of back up a little bit and give basically an added touch of the timeline. All right. So this email comes in, there's synchronicity to it with my husband's journey and my own energetic exhaustion that I went through last week, where I went down for an entire day. And that was after his mother came back up on the scene. So Joe's birthday was last Tuesday, remember? And I was wishing him happy birthday through the podcast episode. The podcast episode was basically like almost 2 hours long. And I was closing everything out, right? I was like checkmating the curse and all of that. Well, there was this incident, I say incident, but where his mother actually texted him the night of his birthday. And that's what I'm going to talk. I'll talk about, everything that's transpired, through that, next week or whatever. But what it did is and his mother is a 9, where that's the birth number, and 9s are openers. Okay. So when she messaged him, that energy got in. So it kind of broke this seal that he and I had been holding in our protection. So I knew something's not right. Something's not done yet, because the minute she texted in and then he called her, and which I'll again speak about later, it opened up and sent in this energy that I didn't know really what it was yet. Okay. But it was a lot. So the next day, Wednesday, the day after his birthday, I was down. I couldn't move. I was down in the bed all day. I only got up to take the dogs out to the bathroom and to eat dinner, and then I was like back in bed. So I knew whatever had happened that night of his birthday and where it ran through me, it literally just took my whole energy field, emotional body out. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then that's when this, after I had gone down, that's when this email submission a few days later had come in that was asking about tools to fight reptilian energy. So that is what gave me the wherewithal that whatever was sent through his mother that got to me was this reptilian energy, not necessarily from his mom, but something that was siphoning through his mother, right? Because I've been helping clear her, which means I'm really clearing Joe. But as I clear Joe, I clear her, right? So with all that being stated, I was at, okay, this is pretty big. This is getting down to even more rooted lineage and why his mother continues to stay in this loop of this drama and chaos, and why, this one particular person is always showing back up in her world. And it was kind of like it all made sense, right? Especially when I got into this session. Well, this client, this person that emailed me through the submission form, she's actually a psychic medium herself. So she's a trained psychic medium, but I like to call her more of that gifted medium. And she just, went down her own way, her own level to learn certain things, right? To hone that craft. And she's also a huge spiritual warrior, and she was at a place where she was ready to be free. So it was interesting because she had made the statement to me that she had gone about 2 years taking a break, so to speak, like she was refueling to be able to bring this back up where it could extract itself. And the irony to that is something that my own mentor had said to me one time in a session, where she was like, well, Shelby, you've been quiet for several years to regain strength or retire in a way to like come back, stronger. And I didn't really understand what she meant back in the day when she said that to me. And so when this client mirrored this to me, I was like, oh my gosh, we are literally on this same exact timeline with each other. It was just like kindred spirits finally meeting and going, wow, there is someone out there who understands in real time what I've been going through. And then vice versa for her. It was like, wow, I found you. We finally, connect in this reality of what's been happening. And so with that being said, the way she came into my world was, she said there was this specific person, which there always is, this specific female in her world, had been in her world for a while. And there was just so much chaos, so much drama. Even her own daughters, were picking this up. And anytime children enter the scene, I always go in to protect the children first. Okay. So that's what I did in the session was, I definitely went into a whole other realm, with the daughters, checking everything before she and I went into and down into this reptilian energy to extract it, because I told her, you always have to protect the children first, and they're teenagers and all that. So they're, really kind of coming into this stuff. So, and they're powerful. So that's how I knew she was powerful. So I was like, okay, we're going to check and balance everything with that. Make sure all that energy is good. We know where they're headed. And then we're going to tackle what, you're actually wanting me to do. So this individual that she was like, Shelby, it's time, this has to stop. She needs to be stopped. This energy has to be stopped. I need you to help me, the tool, whatever. I said, well, how did you find me? Because she lives in a completely different state. Okay. We're not even in the same state. We're not like, we're totally opposite ends of the world. Okay. And so I asked her, I said, how did you even find me? And she said, well, I was talking to my guides, my protective guides, whatever she called them. And I knew it was time for this entity to be stopped. It needed to stop. So I called out to my team, prayed to my team, however she described it. and said, I know there is someone on this planet that knows how to do this, that knows how to stop this reptilian energy, that has the tools, something, and I need you to bring that person to me. So she basically said something like that. Okay, I don't remember her exact words, but it was something that she prayed to her people. I know someone's out here that knows how to do this, has the tool, or can help me stop this. Bring them to me. And then she got this piece of inspiration, right? Her higher self got this piece of inspiration, and she went out online, the beauty of the internet, and she Googled something to the extent of tools to fight reptilian energy or something like that. And she said, that's when I popped up. And I said, well, where did I pop up at? And she said, it was your YouTube channel. And I was like, really? And she said, yes. And of course, in my head, I'm going, did I talk about something like this in one of my videos or something on my YouTube channel? And she goes, and I saw this video. And she goes, and when I started playing it, she said, I watched the whole thing. But when I started watching it, she said, I said to myself, I knew this is the girl. This is the one that can help me. And she said, I watched the whole video. Then that's how she ended up being able to go to my website, because she was like, well, she's got to have a website. Found my website. That's how she got to my contact form. And then that's why she emailed me. And I was like, oh, I said, wow, that's great. So of course I went back on my YouTube channel to go, which video was that? And then I was like, oh, I bet it was this one. So it was, I want to say it was one of the monologues that I did like a long time ago. So it also, gave me proof of information that, never take down any of your videos. You never know when someone's going to find that, or, with a podcast episode or something. So that was really cool for me in the grand scheme of things, that it reinforced the faith in me that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Or when someone is ready for the information appears. And all you have to do, if you're in this level of influence or sharing information, is just to make sure the information is available. Because again, it just goes to show that the energy is very powerful. And when you ask for it, it will show up. Okay, so that really built my confidence again to go, okay, I'm always in the right place with the right pieces of information, with the right people when they need it. So that was really cool for me to also experience. So that was kind of a gift that she gave me of the way of how she found me. So we had a little bit of a conversation so I could just kind of test the waters, see where she was at, see if this was something that I really needed to embark upon with her. And when I got to a place with her where I realized, okay, yeah, I can do this for you, with you, through you. I can be the medium that moves this, because I know how to do it. There was just something in me that said, I know how to do this. I'll do it. And it was so interesting because she said to me, she runs in certain circles of other psychic mediums, light workers, whatever, and they knew what she was going through, but she said that these people were telling her they weren't going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like, we're not touching any of that. Good luck. We're not helping you, kind of a thing. And that's where she got into that desperation and was like, I've got to find somebody that has the tool or knows how to do this. And then that's how obviously she and I connected. So it made sense to me. And I said to her, well, I will tell you, because of the level of emotional, energetic work I have done, and because I have my male in my life that is going through this process himself, I have had no choice but to go through the fire of learning and transmuting it in my own vibration, which is also Joe's vibration, this level of reptilian energy, And that is the only reason I'm going to be able to step forward and help you, because of what I've gone through. So I really was reiterating that to her, that this is not just a psychic understanding, okay? This is more of a mediumship of myself emotionally, that I have gone through this exact type of warfare, and I'm at a place where I'm extracting this now. So our two worlds came together and we can do this together, right? And I'm willing to see it. So that was another thing that I was teaching her was, I'm going into the reptilian cave, so to speak, and I can see it. And I'm willing to see it, because there's no fear in me to see that, because I am protected and everything out here is available for us to see. And if we get scared to see something in that third eye, it's only because we have more work to do in ourselves or our third eye to transmute whatever those fears are. So that's why I told her, let's do this, because I'm ready to see it, right? So that's how it happened. So let me go into what is reptilian energy and how these tactics get created, okay? There is a species that are reptilian. They are reptiles, okay? And they do live underground. This is how it showed up for me and what I saw. They are underground. They're about dark, okay? They aren't actually light. They are about the dark. And the way, and when I say reptiles, just think of a reptile, like a snake, okay, that has scales, all right? That's their avatar, okay? So if you look at aliens and you see different kinds of aliens, like that's the avatar. And we're all aliens walking around, but we're all in these skin suits, right? So I happen to have blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm white, okay? Like this is the earthly avatar that I'm living in. Yet we all come from some place in the universe. We come from a star, constellation, underground water system. We all come from somewhere, okay? So obviously I work for the light in that galactic federation. So somewhere, with me, I always go back to Palladian, right? That's like my thing. I'm Palladian. And so underneath my little earthly skin suit, well, I'm going to look more of what a Palladian looks like. All right. So if you come more from the earth, which is more of the reptilian energy, then you're going to look like that underneath your earthly skin suit, okay? So reptilians, depending upon how they use the light, determines whether they're a better reptilian or not, okay? So it's how they do it. Well, reptilian energy, their tactics, they feed off of emotional drama. And the reason why is because that emotional drama is what creates the energy for them to actually feed from. Okay? So that's why we call this gaslighting, or they create confusion on purpose in order to keep that hook in, okay? And it's intentional. It's why they do it. It's not that they're creating it to move someone forward to be empowered and independent. Does that make sense? Because a light worker can use that emotional energy and also create confusion, but they move them forward into value. They move them forward into self-worth. They move them forward into independence and sovereignty, okay? But where the reptilian energy is, if they're working more on the shadow side, they're using it for control and feeding and gaslighting and hooking. So they're really disempowering the person instead of empowering them. Okay. So what the reptilian energy will do is they will hook into that person's emotional field, which is usually through the abdomen or the sacral or solar plexus chakras. And that's how they hook in, and then that emotion gets stirred up. So when that emotion is getting extracted and going into that reptilian species who is hooked, that's how they cloak themselves in light. Okay? So if you look at that type of reptile, if they have their hooks in so many people, well, then they're getting light energy upon light energy upon light energy upon light energy upon light energy on them. So you look at them and go, and you feel it because they have all this light on them, and you look at them and you feel them and you go, oh, well, they have to be a great person because I feel all of this love and light. And or a lot of times reptiles, don't take offense to this, but a lot of reptiles hide in religion. They hide in the churches. Okay? Because what better way to go in and hook in the emotion but to go where all those people are? So there's a lot of them in the churches. Okay? So with that being said, how do you know if you're dealing with a reptile? Well, you have to go through your tower moment of collapsing. You have to go through your dark night of the soul. You have to go through your emotional breakdowns in your spiritual movement to where you clear out so much of your chakra systems, the first 7, and then also, if you're lucky, the 8 through the 12th chakra, the higher, we have tons of chakras, but, if you can clear with a partner, male partner, 8 through 12th chakra, my God, you'll be freaking solid. Okay. But reptiles, they don't have that. They don't have a heartbeat, right? They're reptiles. So they're not like the light workers who go into and can tell someone authentically because they'll go into the heart chakra, and that's how light workers know, oh, I can feel them in the chest. Okay. But the confusion for a light worker is when they come up against a reptile who has hooks into other beings of light, they may just surface level feel heart energy or light energy, but they don't know if it's valid unless they're able to penetrate through the cloaking of that energy to go into that avatar to see if they basically have a pulse. Okay? Not as a human, but as that specific species of light. And if they can't feel it, then they know they're reptiles. Okay? So that's why I say to people, my X factor is because I've done so much energetic work on myself, emotional work on myself, and I have Joe in as my twin mirror, and we've gone through these spiritual warfare experiences that are exhausting. It just empowered my X factor to be able to go into someone's energetic auric field, and I can chisel down so deeply that I can immediately go, oh, they're reptilian. These are of the light. This is what's going on, because I'm chiseling through all of that energy to get to the core root of what species am I talking to? And that is what protects me. to know who I'm talking to. Am I talking to a reptile that has a lot of light cloaked onto them? Okay, fine. This is the way I need to handle it. Am I talking straight up to a light worker? Great. This is how I need to handle it. Okay. So that's a part of it, right? Because not all reptiles are bad. What makes them bad is how they use it. Not all light workers are bad. What makes light workers bad is how they use the light. Okay. So there's a balance on both sides. So what I discovered in this session, and it took me 5 hours to do it. It was a 5-hour session. All right. And I had to pull Joe in at some point. And the reason it took so long was because I had to protect the kids, right? And then I had to protect my client. And in turn, I had to protect myself. And then I had to protect my husband, and I had to protect our home and our animals. And then I had to protect the neighbors because this was going to be a lot of energy that was going to get uprooted. And it all had to be filtered back ethically where it needed to go. And I couldn't just go in and just pull it out and then not have the systems and processes in place for it to flow, smoothly and ethically back to where it needed to go. And then, work that timeline energy of, how it would go back, because sometimes you can unhook things and things happen too fast and you don't want that to happen. You need a methodical way for it to happen. So when I got into this depth with this new client, I went, oh my, I said, okay, there are 5 hooks on the left side of your abdomen. And that's where she felt it, because she even felt like a little twinge, not pain, but, like pressure. I forgot how she described it, but she felt it. And I saw it. And I saw this, reptilian hand, and it was like very long, they have very long fingers, very long fingernails. And you saw the scales. So that's in my psychic, right? So that was the visual in my psychic. So that's how I knew it was hooked, because I saw the fingers like this. The fingers were, if you're watching on my YouTube, the fingers were hooked and hooked in to her skin. She couldn't get it out. And I was like, oh, well, this must be what's going on with my husband's mother, right? She has a hook in there, which is what kept creating this chaos that was going on. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a 2-for-1 right here. Sorry, I had to take a drink of my tea. So that's when I called in my husband. I was like, okay, I got to get Joe involved in this, because, it's not only going to affect him, it affects his mom, it affects my client, it affects his children, it affects everybody. So, and that's why I saw, like, my mentor is obviously a kahuna. She teaches the Hawaiian system of huna. So I always default into the Hawaiian salt, because there's something special with Hawaiian salt and protection and all of that. And then I had a physical reaction, which confirmed that it was releasing. And then that energetic shift happened in my field and also with Joe, my husband. So what I ended up doing was I saw the hook, and I saw like 5 different entities. I didn't have to know what the entities were. The entities could have been 5 different people. It could have been 5 different installs of emotion. It could have been anything, okay? But it was all coming from one main individual. But then when I got through the one main individual I thought it was coming from, and how quickly they came out of the hook, I said to her, oh God. No. It really wasn't even that person. You were just playing it out. Yes, it was that person, but it really wasn't the depth of the true person that actually this was coming from. She was just the mirror to it. so you could learn it, so you could, have all your experiences that you were having with it, because she came out really, really fast. And then I realized, oh my God, it's the mother to, this male over here. And she was like, I knew it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And then I saw it. And then once I saw that hook, then I was like, oh my gosh. And it went back to this person over here in the lineage. So that's why I had to work it very methodically, because just when the surface level hook came off, then you saw the deeper level hook, and then you saw the deeper level hook from that. And then I was able to see where it was coming in from the lineage and why my client was the one who took it on from her husband, right? So I was like, okay, this all makes sense. This is why this is all happening. And she was like, wow. And I said, yeah. I said, so let me get a pinch of salt, and then I put her on the phone with Joe for a minute. And then I saw that Joe needed to go outside of our house, and he needed to walk the perimeter, and he needed to sprinkle the Hawaiian salt around the yard and the front and the back. Like, I was making sure all that was getting done. And then she does a lot of work with crystals, and her house was totally gridded. And, so we were calling in all of these different protections because we had to protect our spaces, because she and I together were going to go so much higher up in the vibration to work together to bring it all in to where we could really unhook all of this. And me as the medium, I knew what was going to unhook because I saw it. And I was in the energy field with her, so it would run through me to protect her, to protect my husband, to protect his mother, to protect everybody as these things were letting go, okay? So, like I said, working this through her validated that this person in Joe's mother's side of the family that I always felt was the reptile confirmed it. And I was like, because that was the hook I was seeing, not just what my client's hook was and who those entities were, but it was also showing on what my intuition had always felt and why his mother was constantly kept in this loop. And I was like, yep, I knew it. It was this person. This is the one. I've always known it. And so it validated that of who it was on his mother's side of the family, which I'll talk about at a later date. And that's why everything kept getting reinforced through his mother, and why this just loop and drama and chaos and gaslighting and like all of this stuff kept happening. So by me having this session and then coming to a level playing field of each of us being psychic mediums and different parts of the world, and bringing the strength of energy that she houses naturally in her vibration and what I house naturally in my vibration, we were able to come together as a unit. And these reptilian energies didn't know my energy field. And then the reptilian energies over there that she needed released didn't know, or whatever. I'm sorry, I meant to reverse that. Her reptilian energies that we were needing to neutralize didn't recognize my energy field. And then the reptilian energies I needed to break through Joe's side of the family with his mother, they didn't recognize her energies, right? So together we came together and created that confusion in the energy ethically, so the reptiles wouldn't understand who was who, so it would unhook from both of us. That's how we came together to fight, not even fight, to unhook what had been hooked. Okay? That was the beauty of the entire thing. And she pointed that out to me, and I said, yes, that's exactly what's happening. So how you know you've been hooked by that reptilian energy is you get really, really tired. Okay? You get hooked because they're siphoning emotional energy. So there's exhaustion that you go, like that day that I went totally down. I'm talking that kind of exhaustion. Okay. There's confusion that happens where all of a sudden the person's getting confused or they have identity issues. Who am I? Which I knew with Joe's mother, that's been like her whole life, being tired, not knowing who she really is, a lot of emotional looping that was going on, and just a lot of false light around her. Now, do you really think when I went down the next day that I was really clearing her, or do you really think I was clearing Joe? Yes, if you said Joe, you're right. I have permission to clear Joe because Joe is my husband and he and I share the energies. So I was actually unhooking him in his feminine energy from the hook that is in his mother. Does that make sense? I have no permission to actually clear his mother of that hook because she has her own experience with it, right? However, she always has been able to get, when I clear Joe, I clear her, that's probably not the most accurate way for me to say that. It just means that when I clear Joe, I clear a level of her because Joe is no longer in that vibration with her. And so then it just goes back to her, okay? And what her energy is and how she's going to play that out. So, but that's how you know you've been hooked. It's exhaustion, confusion gets created, identity issues of the who am I, the emotional looping, stuff that looks like light, but it's not really light. And so this is the power of having spiritual immunity and emotional sovereignty, is to transform your energy because you transform your wellness, okay? And that's why I always say I'm a teacher of healing through emotion and energy, because emotion is just energy in motion. And I'm a Pisces, right? So I do emotion. And if you don't tap the emotion, then you're not really tapping the energy that's moving through for you to build this emotional immunity to get to true emotional sovereignty of yourself. You have to feel it, but it has to be your own authentic feelings, not something that was mapped into you and you feel it and then you think you went through it. Okay? Like, it really has to be you. So this is why building emotional strength is the key for your healing. It's not just for you, but it is to stop being food for these reptiles or these other species who count on you to be an emotional basket case, because it's how they hook. And if you build up your emotional energy because you've gone through dark night of the soul, emotional purges, brought in that masculine mirror to yourself to work through all of these shifts to build a double immunity on your masculine side and feminine side, well, it's really hard for people to get in there and hook. Okay? But I can guarantee most everyone's hooked somewhere from a reptile in their world. Okay? Because that's just kind of been the balance out here in the matrix right now. And that's why now everything's starting to separate. So when this client came to me and said, there's not much information, Shelby, out here on how to do this, I was like, really? Like, wow, okay. And then she says to me, I just want you to know, you're going to have a lot of people start coming to you about this topic, looking for this. So that's when I was like, oh gosh, okay, I'll put this into a podcast episode so people can have some information. And then that way, if they also need to, help get unhooked, they can have a session or whatever. But it's in the energy field, right, that I carry. So it's very interesting. And I even, was running this with her by saying in the beginning when she and I were talking is that, yeah, well, when it's time, the tool always appears. Because when I was talking to her on the phone for the first time before we decided to have the session and do all of that the next day, I said, yeah, I said, I get a little giggle from your contact form because you asked, I need a tool to fight reptilian energy. And I said, so it took me, having to sleep on it, before I called you to really figure out, okay, what tool is she seeking? And then I told her on the phone, I said, well, you might laugh at this, but I'm the biggest tool for you to use. I am the tool. Okay. And I got a laugh out of it because, growing up, especially in the 80s, the term tool was always used like, oh, that person is such a tool. And it was used in a derogatory manner like, oh, that person's such an idiot, or that person's a jackass, or, you're a bitch, or so, it was used in more of a derogatory term. So now it's funny that I'm telling her that, well, yeah, I'm actually probably the greatest tool like right now that you could utilize to help you with your reptilian energetic issue. Okay. And so she was like, that's fine by me. Let's do this. And then I had to be willing to be used as the tool, which meant I had to be willing to go and see what I needed to see in order to help her extract these hooks. Right. So what I want to explain is, I want to go down into real quick what I saw. And I had to write this down so I didn't forget, even though I can't really forget. When I was on the phone with her, I said, when I was looking at the reptilian energies, I said, they're very earthbound, right? So they're under earth, right? Because, reptiles, they're like on the ground. So I said, so this is kind of like under the earth, right? They do have the scales. They're very, very cold. There's no warmth. They don't have blood. So there's no warmth running through their body, right? And they do look like what you would expect, like what I saw with the hands and fingernails and all that. And the way they incarnate, and I was explaining to her, I said, they're not like light beings in how we incarnate. The way they reincarnate is it's basically through this shedding of their exoskeleton, right? So this one particular reptile that she wanted stopped, that was actually easy for me to unhook, I said to her, that individual, that entity has reshed their exoskeleton so many times. So in their reptilian lineage, so to speak, she would be like a queen of her reshedding and coming and slithering back up to the earth plane and doing light, because she has through time extracted really big light from some really powerful humans of light beings. Okay. And that's kind of how they move up the rankings of their reptilian lineage. Okay. So I kind of described it like sea turtles. Okay. You know how the sea turtles are in the sand, right? They birth basically from the sand. And when you watch videos of the little sea turtles, birthing, they all like come up from underneath the sand, and then they run, towards the ocean. They run towards the water, and then they become, they're in the water. Like that's how they do it. So that's kind of what I saw in the reptilian line is, they're like underneath, and then they just kind of, birth this new exoskeleton. But that layer of them rebirthing the exoskeleton would be like us in the Lightworker community who believe in elevating to different levels of light. So when we die, our energy goes to a different level of light. I know in the churches, they call that heaven, and that you just stay in heaven and that's it. But the more, and I'm not going to talk about that in this episode, but when you really go through your ascension, you learn there's not just heaven, okay? There's different layers of light. And depending on how much work you've done in that layer of light on planet determines the level of light you evolve to when you leave the body. And that's the level of light you're at. And then you come back into another body, and then you work that level of light. And then that's how you keep, you keep going on. So that's how the Lightworkers do it. Well, the Reptilians just do it through the shedding of the exoskeleton, and in their evolutions of power is how much light they can tap into a human that is a light worker that has a lot of strong light worker influence. And that's how, it's evolved through time. So, let's say you have a baby reptile that, they're like, that exoskeleton was just formed, and they come to Earth and they tap into some emotional people, but they're very low level vibrational energies. Well, then they just do very low level shit. Okay. But once they're done and they die, they come out of that body, and then they have the second exoskeleton. Well, then the next time they come back up on Earth, they're going to find friends or people who have, match where that exoskeleton is with that layer of light. And then that's where those exchanges happen. And so the irony to all that is we actually, in the reptiles and the Lightworkers, we've actually helped our own selves evolve. Okay. It's kind of fucked up, but not. But that is how it is. And so now what's happening is because we no longer need that on planet Earth, then you have to be here of the light. So even if you're a reptile species, and I'm only speaking of the reptiles, you still have to be here doing good things. So because you can be a good reptile, so you have to be here doing good things. And if not, well, you're probably not going to stick around that long. Okay? Because we're now moving into that fifth dimensional frequency. We're moving into these higher vibrations. So, even if that reptilian energy wants to still vibrate and be around these auric fields, they still have to work to where they're working for the light, and they're not here to gaslight, create confusion and drama just so they can sustain light and life and have false power and control, because we're moving away from the greed and the wars and all of those things. So if those specific reptilian species are here to create war, separation, entanglement, and that's how they've used their power through time, well, they're getting taken out. They're not, that's not going to be sustainable. Okay. But if they're a reptilian energy and they, are here to work alongside the light, well, then they're going to stick around and help with the rebuild. Okay. Just like with light workers. If a light worker comes into their power and they have all of this power, but they're using it for dark reasons, because there are light workers that do that, use it for dark reasons. Well, guess what? That light worker is not going to stick around because they're not working really for the light. They may be able to absorb light, but it doesn't mean they're actually using the light to do good with that light. Because there's shadow and darkness in everybody and everything. Okay? So that's where it comes down to the morals. That's where it comes down to the spiritual ethics. And that's where I test people. Like, who are you, not just as an energy, but who are you as a being of light, and who are you as an individual in your morals and your integrity and your ethics. And that's why, when I speak to people, I'm always running them through that test, because you can't cloak loyalty. Okay. And so that's why I have very few people currently in my close field, because loyalty is everything. And it's loyalty in the energy, which means it's loyalty to the people that you're around. And if they're not loyal in that energy, I'm at peace out, go, because they're dangerous, right? So this is how all of this works. So just to kind of sum this up, because I'm at an hour, take a breath. When I saw the hooks, okay, those 5 hooks, then I had to begin pulling them out one by one. And how I did that was I had to bring in the male reinforcement, which was Joe, okay? So I wasn't just clearing, my client, but I was actually unplugging the main source of that reptilian tether that was hooked in his mother, that was actually continuing to bring and siphon Joe back into the equation. Okay. And that's what had always kept his mom also in that loop. So I had to break it out of my husband. I had to break it out of Joe to stop the loop. And then whatever happens with his mother, it happens with his mother, because she, that's on her now. It doesn't mean Joe is tethered to that anymore. So that's why the illusions will always shatter. And I'm going to talk about that next week. Okay. So I'm going to remind myself to talk about that next week and write a note down for that. Because the siphoning mechanism of a reptilian is that template of illusion. Okay. They have to keep their victim that they're siphoning from, they have to keep them in the illusion, because the illusion always ends up being the final defense to the truth of what's actually happening. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that next week when I tell you and get you up to date and speed of everything that's happened. But eventually that illusion has to collapse, and that's when the tower moment happens. Okay. And that's where freedom is on the other side. Okay. So through this 5-hour session and mutual psychic medium exchange towards the end of that, I was able to return energy back to his mother, okay, free Joe. I had a colon release, as I call it, right? Because it was in the stomach, so I had to move it all out. And then that was the and then it ran through my spine. So that's how I had the confirmation that my auric field closed that loop, okay? That there were no more open cords at that point. So, and there's no way you can go rehook any of it, because it's like, it was a triad, threefold reinforcement through all the energies that my client, my husband, and myself, were doing. And it's out. And it wouldn't have been able to come out unless it was ready to come out. So it's out, right? So there's no more rehooking that. So yeah, there you have it. That's it. I spoke of all the energy. That was what I needed to say and how it worked. So I wanted to put out this episode today just to share the information, because the information is very current in what I just went through, which means in this podcast episode, the frequency is there. And if you're going through something like this, then maybe this can lend a movement for you. Okay. Or just, a conscious awareness of, if anything, right? And if you need assistance with anything, you can always go to my website, shelbycarino.com, fill out the contact form, or my gosh, go to my YouTube channel, or look at all my podcast episodes, or look at my courses. Like there's things that can help you, because when I got done with this extraction, I said to my client, I said, okay, everything I did with you, I actually moved all those energies through my courses, right? I was using my courses to check her energies, right? That's my template. And I said, so the only thing I feel you need as you continue to move through this, as you start to feel all this unraveling, is you're just going to have to do my celebrity consciousness course, the empowering, that yourself, because you're going to open up all of this celebrity energy around you. And so you're going to need the energy in this specific course to reinforce for you, immunity, stability, confidence, and all of those things. And so that was the tool that I gave her at the end of the session was, okay, we went in, we did the work. Now everything is going to have to unravel. I checked everything up against my curriculum because those have all the energies, and you have moved through all of these energies in the curriculum except this specific course. So just know, as everything unravels, you're going to have to put this course into your vibration, and then you will be able to close out all of those energies, within you that I measured up against my curriculum. And then you will step into that mission, that mission of why you're here and how how that affects everything moving forward in your life. And that's how I tied it up in a bow and, was done with it. And that's what all of this is about. So that's why I say to people, please do my curriculum, because it will give you those frequencies. It will give you those energies. So as you're walking through these experiences in your life, you're reinforcing that energy so you can become that whole and complete unit of that chakra system for yourself. Okay. And all of those subtle energies. Whew. Okay. I'm going to bow that through. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening. And I don't even feel like I have to say anything else. I'll be back here next week with an update of everything that happened from Joe's birthday up until current time, so you can see how this story just kept unfolding. All right. And I will be back with that. So I will be here same time, same place next week. Until then, take care.